And now I'd like to greet you all. Good morning to our friends in North and South America. Good afternoon to our friends in the UK and in Europe, Dubai. Good evening to our friends in India, Nepal. Good evening to our friends in Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, and a good late evening to a few of our friends in Australia. Nice to be sharing time and space with you. It's very interesting, isn't it, when we consider time and space, and with these live stream conferencing technologies, we're looking at people experiencing a different time in a different space. But when we close our eyes, of course, it's a body and a mind, isn't it, in a form world. And, I don't know if you've noticed, we've added some curtains to the backdrop, trying to screen out some of the insect noise. And I'm going to ask your opinion. I didn't want to mess with the beautiful ancient vibe very much, so I had to go with something brown. And actually my favorite color as a little boy was brown. I used to have brown slippers, brown pajamas, and a brown bedspread. And I also had a lot of indoor plants in my bedroom. It's very strange. I had about 15 plants in my bedroom, and everything was brown. So here I am. It's like a heaven realm for the little boy that became a monk, surrounded by brown and surrounded by trees. But I think I'm just kind of looking at it on the screen as well. It's a bit like the folds of the robes, isn't it? Descending from heaven. Thais have this belief that if their son becomes a monk, that they'll be able to grab his robe and it'll carry them all the way to heaven. So anyway, may it be so. When they're dying, they're going to grab onto their son's robe and go to heaven. So I'm not quite sure how it works, but that's that's the belief. So there's been some interesting things in there. Before we go to Q&A, sometimes I just like to chat with you, establish a bit of a rapport. There's been some interesting things in the news. I don't know if anyone else has noticed all of these stories about UFOs. For decades, our governments have been not talking about these things. And now all of a sudden, Fox News in America, 60 Minutes, BBC, Channel 9 in Australia, everyone's telling us that many people in the military have noticed and recorded. We have to upgrade our vocabulary, by the way. We can't call them UFOs anymore. They're not UFOs, they're UAFs. UFO, unidentified flying object. The correct term is unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAPs. So anyway, what happened was a guy in the Department of Defense in America quit his job because he had been in charge of investigating the UAPs. But nothing ever happened. Nothing ever happened with it. Nobody ever told anybody. Nobody told the citizens about it. And he got a bit fed up. And so he found some clips which weren't classified, and he leaked those clips to the New York Times. So it was this general that quit his job at the Department of Defense and leaked clips of military people talking about having seen these things, and unclassified ones. So anyway, as it happens, they've been clocking on their radar aerial phenomenon which descend from 80,000 feet to Earth in 1 second. Pretty amazing. And then they can travel at 20,000 kilometers an hour. So this is mainstream news now, guys. 60 Minutes, Fox, BBC, Channel 9, they're all talking about the fact that since the 1930s, military have been witnessing, and one Air Force pilot was basically saying when he was flying off the coast of America, supposed to be guarding a territory that nobody's allowed to fly in, he witnessed UFOs, UAPs, every day for 2 years. So it's not something that happened 7 years ago once, or something that happened 2004, 2014. This Air Force pilot saw this every day for 2 years. So anyway, it's interesting. It's interesting. It's just interesting because it challenges. I think last year was a year that some things changed, and Ajahn Anan has a prediction. This is the year where everything changes. What do I mean by that? Well, there's a way that we've studied physics, and this doesn't go according to how we understand physics. And there's a way that Christians have understood creation, that this particular human species is built in the mirror image of God. But that's going to get a little bit challenged if all of a sudden you have some big blue ones and some little green ones and some medium-sized gray ones coming from many different worlds. So anyway, on one level I'm being silly, but on another level, it's on mainstream news, guys, in many continents at the same time. So it's a big story. And I don't know if any of you remember the scene in Star Wars where the aliens are in the bar. And they're all having a drink and they're all having a bit of a party. And R2-D2, the robot, the android, tries to get in. And there's kind of these green ones and these multi-headed ones and these snake ones and these gorilla ones. And the bartender yells, "No, your type aren't allowed in here." But all the other types were. Anyway, I'm being silly. But it is, it is interesting. Anyway, I'm optimistic, I'm hopeful. What am I optimistic about? I'm optimistic that they're not our enemies. Why am I optimistic about that? Because if they have technology which is so much superior to ours, they can fly 20,000 kilometers an hour, they can descend 80,000 feet in 1 second, they can avoid radar, and they haven't destroyed us yet, I'm optimistic that they might be friendly. So anyway, let's see. Time will tell. And has anyone else noticed those stories? You want to nod your head? Has anyone else seen the UFO stories? UAPs? No? Okay. Sometimes I wonder no, I'm not going to say that. It sounds too negative. I was going to say, I wonder if they couldn't be worse than our current leadership on this planet, could they? But the thing about samsara is, unfortunately, it can always get worse. So anyway, let's be optimistic for now. JC, I believe we may have a Dharma question. But sorry,
yes,
I'll try to tie this in with a bit of Dharma. So basically, not just being silly. So basically, if you keep your 5 precepts, Lord Buddha does say that this has a very protective quality, as does loving kindness. And when we cultivate loving kindness, we cultivate it towards all beings everywhere. So obviously that includes, I wouldn't call them aliens or extraterrestrials. I would call them humanoid. So other human-like species from other 4-element worlds. What's interesting about differences of cultures, like people in Western cultures are quite, I think, fascinating. If they had the opportunity to speak with an alien, I think many people in Western countries would like that opportunity, as long as they were friendly. The Thais are interesting because Thais have this rich Buddhist cosmology. So I was doing a little bit of research about cultural differences, and I was asking the lay people who offer the food to the monks every day the other day. I asked them, if you could talk to an alien from another planet or a Naga, serpent spirit from the Mekong River, which one would you want to talk to? And they all said they'd like to talk to the Naga. And then I asked them, okay, well, if you could speak to the president of another world or to a Brahmadeva, would you rather speak to the president of another world or a Brahmadeva? And all of them except one said they want to speak to the Brahmadeva. So it's like, for Thais, they're aware of beings in parallel realms and other universes since childbirth. So the idea that there might be other humans out there doesn't really excite them very much. But for Westerners, for our governments and media have kind of ridiculed anybody who mentioned these things for decades. So it's interesting, more interesting to us. But anyway, enough of these reflections. JC, the serious Dharma question, please.
Yeah. Question 1. Ajahn, were you in Chitta Viveka, Chitta's Buddhist monastery, Petersfield, England? I collected couples of DVDs developing peace beyond suffering from there a few years ago when I visited the center. I gave one copy to a Nepalese Buddhist friend of mine and I kept the other copy. I have listened to the most of your teachings contained in it. Only last week I realized that you are the author of this DVD. My anumodana to you, Bhante. I found your instructions are very useful to me. I especially like the meditation on contemplating death, dying and impermanent, not self-nature of the human body, 2009 and 2015. It also frightened me a little when I was listening and meditating. Hence, I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little more on it this afternoon, please. What is its practical value in our daily life? How often we should practice it? I have heard that Buddha advised Venerable Ananda and others we should contemplate death with every in-breath and every out-breath. Thank you.
So the first part of the question, yes, about 5 years ago, I produced a DVD with most of my recorded teachings and guided meditations. It was just audio files, but in those days, the live streaming and apps weren't what they are today. So it was a way to get a lot of content onto one CD, reduce the weight. So we put it onto a DVD. So I think there was more than 100 files on the DVD. And I didn't live in Chithurst, but I sent it to our main branch monasteries all around the world. And I think I also distributed it in Australia after the Dalai Lama's teachings. I had a stall there. So after that, a lot of that same material was uploaded to Insight Timer and my website. And so I stopped making CDs because it became available online much more easily. So with regards to the question, and I'm very glad that this man found the DVD and found it helpful. Wonderful. So death meditation, what value does it play in our daily life? So we can't really talk about just death meditation without talking about other meditations. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about trying to have a balanced practice, working with several meditation objects. So as we were just doing in the guided meditation before, we use breath meditation for calming and for sharpening clarity, presence of mind. That's our foundation, anapanasati, mindfulness of in and out breathing. We also cultivate loving kindness for that foundation of well-being. And as Lord Buddha explains in the Sutra on loving kindness, one of the 11 benefits of loving kindness is that the minds of people who cultivate loving kindness become peaceful more quickly and more easily. So many people want to experience more samadhi or longer periods of stillness and peacefulness. And so Lord Buddha is giving us a very helpful pointer here. Those who cultivate metta, the mind does become peaceful more easily, more quickly. So then we also do the body contemplation and the death awareness, but we need to have this foundation of loving kindness. We need to have basic functional well-being. We need to steward the healthy functioning of this mind-body phenomenon. You have to have a healthy sense of self-care, and that's the foundation upon which you investigate not self. And death meditation can be quite confronting because there is a deep latent tendency to grasp at things as being permanent. When you have a glimpse of the fact that they're not, if you don't have a steady foundation of some mindfulness and wisdom, and I would say some deep faith as well. So that's another of these anussatis, is buddhanusati. And the thing about buddhanusati is that we have faith that there is something more. It's not that just this body could die any moment and then that's it. It's not nihilistic, it's not bleak, it's an extremely optimistic worldview. Well, actually an extremely optimistic reality. I don't believe that the Buddhist worldview is just a worldview. I think Lord Buddha is describing the truth. So what does having faith in the Buddha and his enlightenment mean? It means that we have faith in Nibbana, the unconditioned, a state that can be realized through purifying the mind, where the purified mind is liberated and experiences a quality of unshakable peace. So that's very important. Sometimes we have faith in the Buddha, but we don't apply it to ourselves, and we must. The Buddha is not an external refuge only, it is an inner refuge. Lord Buddha demonstrated your potential, the potential of any being with a body and a mind. Unenlightened beings' minds are affected by greed, hatred, and delusion. Lord Buddha demonstrated that the greed, hatred, and delusion can be uprooted, and what remains is a purified, liberated mind, experiencing Nibbana. So that's your potential. And we really need to meditate on this until we get it. I'm not the sum of my good and bad habits. I am a being with sometimes called Buddha nature or Buddha potential, Arahant nature, Arahant potential. So we need to have that strong faith at the heart of hearts is a potential to experience purity and unshakable peace. That's your deeper nature underneath the kilesa. So when we have to do some work on that, because the faith is what's going to help us process and integrate the insights in a healthy way. So with faith in the Buddha, faith in the Arahants, faith in your potential, faith in the ultimate wholesome good nature of mind, then we also do the metta. And it all ties in. It's the reason we have to keep precepts as well. It's like if you're a good person, then you're not going to experience too much anxiety or remorse. So you want that foundation of well-being, healthy self-confidence, and faith in your ultimate good nature. Then you do the metta practice. You get some genuine healthy self-care going, and loving your breath practice to get that presence of mind and clarity. And so once we have those things, some dana, feel good about having been a basically generous and kind person, ethical precepts, virtue, deep faith, you have a refuge. Now, let's have a closer look at impermanence. Because this grasping at things as being permanent causes us a lot of suffering. What kind of suffering? Well, when things change in a way that we weren't expecting, we tend to experience sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. But if we know it was going to change, if we already knew before it changed, it was going to change, you're not going to have the same kind of shock, and you're not going to have that, why me? How did this happen? Kind of thing that most human beings do when things change. There's going to be that, oh, it changed. Okay. And then get on with it. What's the best way that you can deal with the changed circumstances without lamenting too much and grieving too much? We have to be kind with our grief, of course, but I'm just saying, if you do your Gamatan, your mental cultivation correctly, when things change, you won't be so surprised. You were expecting it. So then we have to have a balance. So when we get to the death meditations and the body contemplation, this is where we're ripening the mind for the deeper insights, the liberating insights. So we're not talking now about just living a nice life. We're not talking about trying to squeeze as much pleasure and happiness out of this life as we can without having to go to hell next life. We're talking about laying the foundations for liberating yourself from psychic existence. So this is serious work. Work for the spiritual grown-ups who want to put on the boots and pull up your big boy pants, your big girl pants, and get serious about uprooting and destroying greed, hatred, and delusion. So that's why I'm saying it's a strong medicine. There's different ways you can approach it. If you're just thinking a little bit, yeah, it's possible I could die today over your cup of tea. That's helpful. It's going to make you less surprised and shocked if you do. But if you're really coming to your meditation cushion and you're really asking yourself, is it possible that I might die today? And the answer is yes. And then you have to ask yourself, well, how? How are the ways that I might die today? And you might have to, sometimes there's a bit of a assumption, but I probably won't. There's this assumption of permanence, a kind of a conceit of life. So there's an assumption that you'll probably live to be quite old. And that's not a realistic assumption, because many people die when they're young, many people die when they're middle-aged. So I hope you live to be healthy and old, a lot of time to practice. But we have to admit that we might not. So many people fall over in their bathroom. This is a curious thing. I think almost as many people die in their bathroom as die on the roads. And how many people, when they're having a shower, are mindful of the fact that they might be just about to die? The phone rings, you're late to work, you rush out, trip, you hit your head on a hard floor or a hard bench, and you have a cerebral aneurysm, bleeding. It happens a lot. It's very common. And then car accidents is probably the biggest. How many people, when they get in a car, it's like everybody's paranoid about the coronavirus, oh my God, viruses. And it's like, if you look at the statistics, you're probably much more likely to die in your car than you are from the coronavirus. But you don't feel paranoid and terrified and of every other car that approaches you, like you do if you're in a coronavirus hotspot. But we do these contemplations to be mindful of the fact that death could occur at any moment. And then sometimes we have to use our imaginative faculty, like we imagine ourselves in a death scenario, and you imagine that you die today. This is more than a superficial contemplation. This is a investigation, acknowledging the fact that you might, considering the ways that it's possible within a meditative discipline. And if it's done correctly with a mind that has a certain amount of mindfulness and collectedness, done with sincerity, what should arrive is a sense of sobriety. It's really sobering. And we do this enough that we get skilled at it. It's very, very helpful, because if the mind begins to become in an unwholesome state, if people who have cultivated death meditation diligently, we can just ask ourselves, if you die now, where do you think you're going? Because if the mind's in a very angry state, it's going to go to an animal, ghost, hell, or demon state. If the mind's in a very lustful state, again, sensual, passionate realm. And so we can ask ourselves, an angry grudge, you want to take revenge. And so ask yourself, okay, well, if you die today, where do you think you're going to be reborn? It's very, very helpful to be able to have this as a frequent, it's not just awareness of death, it's awareness of, unless you're an arahant, you have to take a rebirth. And so it's very helpful for helping us to keep a wholesome mind state. Then there's the body contemplation. So it's this body that's the foundation of our grasping at it as being a self. We tend to perceive this body as I, me, and mine. That's where most of the attachment is. And then, of course, your children, your husband, your wife, your career, all of the other stuff. But there's a lot of attachment to the body. And when we investigate bones as bones, skin as skin, blood as blood, earth element as earth element, water element as water element, when we do that in a disciplined way with sincerity and integrity, what will happen is that feeling of being a sense or sense of self will fall away from the mind for periods of time. And you can experience a body sitting, still aware that it's a body, aware of an in-breath, aware of an out-breath, but no feeling of a self being there. Because that deluded grasping falls away from the mind for a period of time. These are extremely helpful experiences, because when you experience the body and mind without the self view present, when you experience that sense of letting go, when it comes back, it helps you not to believe it as much. So the self view will still be functioning, but you don't believe it like 100% like you did before. And as you become more adept in this, you can have periods where the sense of self falls away, you're aware of a body as a body, feelings as feelings, the mind's quite peaceful. And then the sense of self comes back, try to relate to it skillfully, try to relate to other conventional beings skillfully. But this practice deepens and deepens to the point where if a person is contemplating the elements, they can have a jhana experience where that perception of just the earth element, for example, is the only perception, and the mind absorbs into the state of one-pointed collectiveness. And it can also lead to very deep insights into not-self. When the mindfulness and clear comprehension sees that the bones are earth element, the sense of self falls away, the identification with bones as being a self falls away from the mind. There's the natural insight. How can this thing be a self? It's a pile of earth, water, fire, and wind. So they're very powerful practices, and the results that one gets from them deepen over time, depending on how much effort we put into them and depending on how much practice we've practiced in the past. But I wanted to mention several meditations. We need our Buddha Anusati. We have a refuge and we have faith. This gives us confidence, trust, courage. And then we have Anapanasati, our breath meditation, giving us a foundation of stability. We have a loving kindness, a healthy sense of self-care, goodwill. Upon that foundation of being generous and ethical as well, upon that foundation we begin our Gammatana, our investigation into the nature of the body as a direct antidote to perceiving it as permanent and pleasant, anicca, dukkha, anatta, and the self. And so when we do this practice diligently, that sense of self, or grasping at the self, the sense of grasping at the self gets less, and the mind will have periods where the self falls away. And it's laying the foundation for having the insights into not self that are deep enough for the mind to glimpse and experience nirvana. And when the mind glimpses and experiences Nibbana, then it understands very deeply that that's the ultimate truth, and that grasping at delusion is painful. And it understands that not grasping at delusion, letting go of delusion, is blissful and liberating. So in terms of how much do we do, it really depends on how much time you have. We actually have to do all of these things. But most people are coming and doing 1 or 2 sessions a day. And I think what we have to do in terms of, we have to have short-term, intermediate, and long-term goals. So in terms of our short-term goals, when you come to sit, you have to have a look at which hindrances are most present. So if every time you sit, you're having a sexual, lustful fantasy, then you need to do some body contemplation. Like, okay, have a look at bones, have a look at blood, have a look at undigested food, have a look at excrement. The mind needs to be sobered up from its sexual passion. It needs to have a deeper understanding of what bodies actually are. Or if you come and you sit and you're constantly proliferating about the future and planning about the future, then you need to apply the remedy of, I might die today. Or if most of the time you come to sit, you're picking up your favorite angry grudge. My mum shouldn't have spoken to me that way. My dad shouldn't have done that. My teacher shouldn't have been. My ex-husband, blah, 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 blah. If that angry grudge comes up and that same old spiel about all the things they shouldn't have done and all of the things they should have done, then you need to apply metta. So in the short-term goals, we're aiming at balance. We're aiming at dropping the most coarse hindrances and the most coarse kilesas and allowing the mind to experience some collectedness, some presence of mind. When you get opportunities to do retreats, or if you're in a semi-retired or retired situation where you are able to deepen your practice, start to sit for 2 or 3 times a day, then it's a different story. Then you actually have the situation where you can really start applying these disciplines in a way where you're actually chipping away at the ignorance and the grasping at things as being permanent and a self and sukha, pleasant, and having a look at the deeper nature, the ultimate truth, the true characteristics of it being anicca, anatta, and dukkha. So in answer to the question, I don't know how much spare time this person does, and I don't know how much meditation he does, but there are many benefits to the death meditation. So I should mention that with death meditation, the mind will not attain to jhana. It leads the mind to the state of upacara samadhi, touching on jhana. But it does weaken the tendency to perceive things as permanent and grasp at them. So it's a practice which ripens the mind. It's beginning to clear away the thickness of the ignorance and delusion. It's preparing the soil in a way for the deeper insights. And experiencing upacara samadhi, getting close to jhana, is also very helpful for the mind attaining to jhana, the first jhana eventually. So it's an enormously helpful practice. Ajahn Anan, I believe, practiced death meditation as his main practice for the first 4 years as a bhikkhu. And he said he was able to be in upacara samadhi. Obviously, he's an advanced practitioner, but it's just nice to know where it can go. So he said he was able to experience upacara samadhi for a period of months. So upacara samadhi means only very, very few thoughts and only very wholesome thoughts, and the mind almost absorbing into jhana, experiencing a lot of contentment and serenity and tranquility. So this practice can lead to you experiencing such states for periods of months if you're very diligent with it. After 4 years, Ajahn then did body contemplation, and he did. Ajahn Chah had told Ajahn Anan that if he did body contemplation, his practice would progress further. But Ajahn Anan was very content and pleased with the results he was getting, so he was a little bit stubborn and didn't follow his teacher's advice, actually. And when he eventually did, he saw, oh, Rinpoche Chah was right, because when he did the body contemplation, he had deeper insight, and he did get the jhana samadhi after having the deeper insight. So very, very powerful practices which can lead to liberation. So it was a long answer. I hope something I said was helpful.
Thank you so much, Prajan. Prajan, question 2. Dear Ajahn, I have finally established calm and stillness in my meditations over a certain period of time where thoughts are on the back burner. Then I came across the following that Ajahn Anan wrote in the booklet Sotipattimagga, translated by Ajahn Kalyano. You may experience calm so deep and profound that it seems to open up the truth. But the Buddha explained that this is just the vipassanupakilesa arising. This is an obstacle to the practice and will create difficulties in the development of vipassana.
So I think Tanaka. Yeah,
Yes, second page. I've heard the other teachers talking about this blind track as well. How can I know if the calm and stillness I experience is the right one? With much gratitude and metta.
Right. So Ajahn Anan is talking about a particular type of peacefulness that he experienced that after some time he realized wasn't, what's the phrase that they use, leading onwards. And but I don't think this is what human beings do. We're taking this one paragraph from Ajahn Anand's experience of becoming enlightened, and we're worrying about this one obstruction that he had when he was quite progressed along the path. And the sense that comes up for me is, if you're experiencing some calm with still some thoughts in the background, this isn't your problem yet. You don't need to worry about this. The fact that you feel some increased sense of peace and clarity and that you're aware that there are thoughts, this is probably the upachara samadhi experience. What Ajahn Anan is talking about is it's a subtle kilesa that slows people down once they're already quite advanced. So he said, yeah, a type of peacefulness which is so amazing. Basically, it's like people think that they're abiding in nibbana already, and then they realize actually there's still a bit more ignorance and delusion there that needs to be uprooted. But it's quite a profound state in a way. It's a subtle obstruction, because the more we develop on the path, the more subtle and sophisticated Mara and the obstructions are as well. And so, but what I take from Ajahn Anand's story or the description is that because of these qualities of mindfulness and wisdom, when he got there and when he was practicing with that, at a certain point he recognized this isn't it. There's still a bit more ignorance and delusion there. So mindfulness and wisdom continues to do its work, and it's like peeling onions in a way. It's just like, okay, there's another layer to come off. Okay, there's another layer to come off. There's another layer to come off. But as long as we're doing our practices which support the development of mindfulness and wisdom, the layers will keep coming off. The mindfulness and the wisdom get sharper and sharper, and the ignorance, even if it's more and more subtle, it will get uprooted. But I think if one has struggled to experience some peacefulness, is finally experiencing some peacefulness, and there's still a bit of thoughts in the background, this isn't something you need to worry about yet. And you should derive gladness about the progress, and you don't need to worry about it. Enjoy it. Enjoy the peace and the calm that you have developed from your consistent efforts.
Ajahn, question 3. Can rapture be experienced outside of meditation practice? Thank you.
Definitely. It most definitely can be. So for somebody who meditates several times a day, it's usually, and suppose you're meditating a couple of times a day and chanting, the mind is becoming familiar with rapture as something that it experiences regularly. And so if you're listening to a Dhamma talk and the mind just kind of is singing with delight at the Dhamma, you can feel extremely glad about the truth, just resonating with truth. The mind feels rapturously happy with that resonance of truth. Thinking of the Buddha just while you're walking around, or one of your teachers, there might just be some thoughts that occur to you that you're so grateful for this teacher, or you're so grateful for the Buddha, and then the mind can experience from kind of thrilling, rapturous, glad experiences. And then when I was first beginning to teach retreats, I would, when recollecting my teachers and the Dhamma and how grateful I am to the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha, I used to cry because I couldn't hold back my tears of happiness. And now I've got more experience of teaching. I can say to myself when the tears are coming, I can have a little quiet word with myself inside, say, don't cry, cry later. But they were happy tears, but happy tears, as happy as they were, they're not so helpful when you need to finish a Dhamma talk. So I had to train myself to cry about that later, just please finish the sentence. And but yeah, so just recollecting how much gratitude I felt towards the Buddha, because I remember how much suffering I had as a young adult and how lost I felt and directionless. And then when I found a true direction and remedies to the suffering and a path, I feel tremendous gratitude to the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha. And so thinking of that brings rapture. Yeah, and I have one student, when he gave up drinking wine after decades, started keeping precepts regularly and meditating regularly. He also reported to me that he would feel rapture for no reason whatsoever. He would just feel rapturously happy. So this kind of foundation of well-being that comes from not breaking precepts, there's nothing to feel remorse about. The foundation of well-being gets so established that just walking around, one can just feel tremendously well. And some of it will also depend on what types of merit we've made in the past. So people who've made a lot of particularly auspicious merit are very likely to experience rapture in their waking lives. And for all of that, for those of us who don't yet, in the future, that will be the result of living a skillful life and making auspicious merit. There will be more the karma vipaka, the wholesome karma vipaka of having done skillful things, will ripen in the mind, both in and outside of meditation. And I think the enlightened beings are actually experiencing rapture all the time, except when they're in the fourth jhana, which is pure equanimity, or in one of the higher jhanas, where it's the infinite base of space or the infinite base of nothingness. So, okay, they might get a break from their rapture, but when they come out of their meditation, from the power of the purity of their mind that doesn't experience the five hindrances, they are experiencing rapture constantly. And I think sometimes you go to visit your teachers, and if you have the good fortune to visit the enlightened masters or people somewhere progressed along the stages of enlightenment, and part of the uplift that you feel in their presence is, I think, it's the rapture that they're experiencing in their mind, and you're sitting in their mind. So you're getting some of those tickles of rapture, and some of that purity and some of that metta is kind of embracing your mind while you're in their presence. And you feel so uplifted, you feel so blessed. And so yes, one can experience rapture in every posture, at any time of the day or night.
Question for Ajahn. We meditated for a bit before you joined us this evening, and a very beautiful chant was playing. I meditated on the sound instead of the breath, and it was a very pleasant meditation. Can I meditate the chants, or would the pleasant sound actually be a hindrance of sensual pleasure? Thank you.
I'm glad this person asked this question, because one of the things that it occurred to me to mention to people is, I do think that listening to uplifting things in this particular point in our juncture in history of our human civilization and the current challenges that we're facing, I do think that listening to pleasant sounds, which allude to heavenly states or very wholesome states is very helpful. Part of it is a balancing thing. Like if you are hearing news which is distressing, if you are hearing things which are giving rise to feelings of fear and anxiety, then it's really helpful to give the mind a pleasant, uplifting, wholesome. And of all of the things that we were listening to, rather than listening to something on some music, pop music, then listening to chanting with a pleasant soundscape, I think is very wholesome. But I wouldn't do it as the meditation. So I think this is the kind of thing you would do in the car on the way to work or on the train on the way to work. Keeping the mind wholesome, having some awareness of heavenly. You know, if the world is kind of becoming less heavenly and a little bit more ghost-like or demon-like, then we need to do things which helps our minds to resonate with heaven and beyond, because that's where we want to go. So I do think some of these chants, and it's really great these days that on YouTube there's a lot that's available for free, and a lot of it is actually quite good quality in terms of the production value. But when you come to sit, then I think we really do need to stop with the external sense impingement, turn inward, and really see a body as a body, thoughts as thoughts, feelings as feelings, and not be adding any. Sometimes this is why we do the chanting. We do 20 minutes or a half an hour of chanting beforehand, because it puts the thoughts on a wholesome object, primes the mind for meditation. But some people prefer to listen to a Dharma talk, or you can alternate. Chant one day, meditate, a Dharma talk the next day, meditate. So that, but the music is like, okay, if you're doing the housework, you're doing some cleaning, you're doing the washing, you're doing some cooking, or you're traveling to or from work, that's a good time to have some chanting with some nice music in the background, and kind of replace other forms of media. And be careful with how much news you consume, because if news is depressing or distressing, then you want to expose yourself to just as much as you need to know. Don't expose yourself to more than you need to know, for longer than you need to, because we are affected by the things that we hear and see. It's one of the reasons I did produce chants with soundscapes, was to support people who find themselves in modern contexts where, for example, you might not see a Buddha statue, or nobody might talk about spiritual practice in the place where you live. But if you're on the train and you can listen to verses in praise of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, or verses about radiating metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha, or verses about cultivating the 10 paramita, then obviously this is helpful. And Shivani, our Indian friend, is in the process of creating a collection of Pali chants that will have some nice Indian soundscape, for this very reason, that we need, because she has a nicer voice than mine. So now that I know her, I'm going to, well, they're nice in different ways, let's just say that. So, but she has a very beautifully trained voice, and so we want to take advantage of her talent and help direct it in a way that will be uplifting to people. Is Shivani here this evening? I haven't seen her so far.
I haven't seen her as well.
Okay.
No, I think she's not in today.
Yeah, Ajahn. Whenever I open my email lately, it's like, Ajahn, could you please pray for this person? Ajahn, could you please pray for this person? Could you please? So there's a lot of Indians who have relatives who are needing metta blessings at the moment. So Shivani may be one of those people who has relatives who need some care. So in the last fortnight since I saw you, we did give the scholarships to the children in the village. And I also liaised to transfer 100,000 baht to India and 150,000 baht to Bhutan in Nepal as well. So I know that some of you contributed to those wonderful projects, and Anumodana. And I feel very blessed, privileged, honored that I'm in a situation where I'm able to direct resources to people who need them. thank you for trusting me to give me the pleasure of being in that position. And we have quite a bit more. I will be doing 4 more transfers to India in the coming months, and 1 or 2 more transfers to Nepal as well. So.
Thank you, Prajan, for a lovely evening and lovely chant tonight as well. It was very uplifting and nourishing as well.
Thank you so much, Prajan.
Thank you, Kaprajan.
Sadhu.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Thank you very much.
Sadhu.
Sadhu to you.